Hi, I'm Ken. Today I want to talk about the recently released documentary, UnCharitable, featuring Dan Pallotta, and it's based on his famous TED Talk. I saw it about a month ago, and I've been watching the reaction in the fundraising world. It has been welcomed warmly and acclaimed by the fundraising and nonprofit world, who have now structured viewings for staff, volunteers, and donors to get the message out. It makes the case that the charitable sector has been misunderstood. A sector that does remarkable things on often shoestring budgets. The documentary makes the point that the nonprofit sector is a different kind of business model, and it's simplistic and inaccurate to apply for-profit metrics, especially a simple cost per dollar raised measurement, as the sole measurement. Also, it zooms in on the societal focus on senior management compensation, begging the question, what's wrong with fair leadership compensation for those highly creative and bold individuals who do amazing work? What's wrong with that? The documentary has lots of examples of very successful, usually event-based fundraising that has been unfairly targeted, according to Pallotta, for excessive cost of raising funds and for excessive compensation to senior management. It makes an emotional appeal for the support of charitable nonprofits as a different business model, because we are different with different goals, different measurements, so treat us differently. However, and today in this video, I want to talk about the however. The documentary deserves a more critical look and an investigation into the other side of the coin. So let's do that now. We must acknowledge the understanding that fundraising presented in the documentary was quite limited, mostly large participatory event fundraising. We all know that this is the most inefficient type of fundraising, and this type of fundraising is usually an acquisition model used to acquire new prospective donors. And it's even acceptable to lose money on acquisition. There seems to be no understanding presented in the documentary of the donor journey pipeline development that moves the donor over time into highly efficient area of personal philanthropy, leadership giving, major gift giving, and certainly plan giving, gifts from estates. However, even if we ignore what's this huge gap in the presentation of fundraising as an industry in the documentary, there are other elements that Pallotta has left out. And if we wanted to really value that documentary, and we are, because we're presenting it to our volunteers and donors, then we have to also address, I believe, the areas that Pallotta has left out. We must look deeper and take an honest look at our business. First of all, there is no consensus in our industry in how we actually measure our business. We are huge. Look at the numbers. The nonprofit sector in every country is a considerable portion of the gross domestic product of that country. We're huge. How do we know if we don't measure our business? How do we know if we're doing a good job or a poor job? A lot of difficulty exists because it's almost impossible to measure the impact of our own particular missions on society. And it's impossible to do it accurately across the sector. For example, how do you compare the saving of a puppy from a puppy mill? How do you compare that impact on society to the impact of flying a child from around the world for life-saving surgery. You can't compare that. There is an answer, however, and that answer is to let the donors decide the importance of the impact. It doesn't mean we don't try to be clear about impact. This leads to recommendation number 1 I would like to make, something to add to the documentary, if you will. And that is strive to drill down and present the impact of our own unique missions in our own unique organizations in our own distinct measurable units. Call this our ultimate accountability. What do we really do, and strive to find measurable units to describe this. Then let the donors decide what value that is. Because in essence, that's what they're doing with their donations. At the same time, be as upfront as possible with measured impact versus the costs to deliver that impact. So stop trying to hide costs. You know the game a lot of organizations play to make the costs for fundraising look as attractive as possible. In fact, we need standardization of reporting, hard accounting standards that report real costs in a standardized manner across the entire sector. Just like every other industry has these accounting standards, why not fundraising? Then we put the costs up against our unique impact measurements and let the donors decide. This will preclude any criticism on costs of dollar raised. The second deep dive is that we exist in an unregulated industry. Unregulated, for the most part. Regulation is primarily done by tax authorities, mostly concerned with the proper use of the charitable tax deductions or charitable tax credits. Fiduciary regulation is generally passively done by other bureaucratic offices in various states, provinces, counties, or countries, but it is usually limited in scope. So we are primarily unregulated, and that gets us into all sorts of problems that are kind of revealed in the documentary UnCharitable. As I always say, someone could start work today as a fundraiser and tomorrow be sitting in the home of a 92-year-old woman with limited faculties and receive a check for $100,000 or pounds or euros, signed by a shaky hand, whether she can afford it or not. Fundraising is the only industry in every country that allows this level of unregulation. A giant void of conduct. So, of course, the critics of fundraising have had a field day criticizing us, and because we have no guaranteed standards to fall back on. Pallotta doesn't mention this. And it leads to recommendation number 2. We need self-regulations. I know fundraisers hate the thought of it, but we need it. Mandatory regulations, and not voluntary, with real testing, with clear reporting standards, with real teeth for compliance. England and Wales has the Charity Commission, created in response to charity misuse, but the oversight even there is cursory at best. Governments don't have the resources to regulate us. Charities and fundraisers don't want this, but if we want real change in how society views our industry, we'll move to self-regulation and not try to change public perceptions with a flashy documentary. The third deep dive that is that Pallotta ignored the occurrence of real scandal, real fraud in every country's nonprofit sector. Our industry is rife with instances of misuse of charitable status. I'm going to refer you to a video I did on my YouTube channel titled How to Tell Your Grandmother You're a Fundraiser. Look it up. I'll put the link below. The fact is, anybody can start a charity with little scrutiny, begin to collect donations, and pay themselves as much as they want. And it happens. And charities duplicate themselves. There's no regulation that stops a charity with the exact same mission being started within days of each other by two individuals who are going to work and draw a considerable salary, and that duplication is considered just fine. So my recommendation number 3 is to create a process of new charitable organizational screening with demands for a business plan prospectus, a check to avoid duplication with existing charities, a check that the mission must pass charitable scrutiny. It must act as a charity for worthwhile charitable actions. Again, we can self-regulate this, and we need to. It's understandable that the documentary UnCharitable was warmly received by the nonprofit sector. But ultimately, I'm going to say it's not helpful. It does make the case that the charitable sector is a different type of business, but the answer isn't simply to trust us. In reality, public trust in the sector has been eroding for years, and a well-produced documentary won't do anything to change that. We must look at the other side of the coin and answer the question, what proactive steps can we do through our associations that we belong to earn that trust, to self-regulate to high standards in a number of ways. Governments would welcome self-regulation of the fundraising industry, just as they have for every other industry. That's how they're all regulated. We just don't want to take that step. In the trailer description, Pallotta demands that charities be freed from traditional sackcloth and ashes constraints so they can change the world. Ironically, charities are actually not constrained. We have great latitude in how we conduct our business. We fundraisers must make real change in the way we do our business and our important work in society. We must mature as an industry, or in the end, nothing will change. Thanks for watching. If you're on YouTube, subscribe and do a thumbs up. It helps spread the word. Thanks for watching again, and as always, good fundraising.